The first thing to go was Dr. Aris's thumb. Jack was there when it happened, holding a flickering light panel in the medbay ceiling, while Aris complained about the budget cuts. 1 minute. The doctor was holding a sterile data slate, his thumb poised over the screen. The next, he made a small, surprised sound, like a man who'd pricked his finger. He looked down at his hand. Jack looked down too. Dr. Aris's thumb was no longer a thumb. It had lost its shape, its knuckle, its nail. It was melting, sagging into his index finger. The 2 digits were flowing together like warm wax, the skin turning a pale, shimmering pink. There was no blood, no sound of tearing flesh. Just a silent, horrible fusion. "Jack," Aris whispered, his voice tight with a kind of strangled wonder. "Do you see this?" Jack saw it. He dropped the light panel. It clattered to the floor, plunging the corner of the room into shadow. He could still see the doctor's hand, though. It seemed to glow faintly in the gloom. The thumb and index finger were one now, a smooth, tapering stump. Now the middle finger was beginning to drift toward it, the skin between them stretching and thinning, becoming translucent. "Get back," Jack said, his own voice sounding distant and reedy. It was the voice he used when talking to his daughter, Lily, after a nightmare. "It doesn't hurt," Aris said. He lifted his hand, turning it over. His other fingers were curling inward, joining the slow, soft-fleshed catastrophe. The entire hand was collapsing in on itself, becoming a single, streamlined paddle of flesh. The bones had to be dissolving. There was no other way. "My God, Jack, it's my gen mods. The ones for low-gravity dexterity. They're rewriting." Jack didn't know about gen mods. He was a maintenance jockey. He knew circuits and pressure seals. He knew the groan the main airlock made when it was about to fail. He didn't know anything about the cocktail of genetic alterations every colonist on New Hope had to take. Stronger hearts for the thin atmosphere, denser bones, UV-resistant skin. All standard procedure for off-world living. He'd never thought about it twice. Aris let out a soft cry. His other hand went to his face. His fingers sank into his cheek as if it were soft clay. When he pulled his hand away, his cheek was distorted, pulled into a smooth, featureless curve that blended his nose and mouth on one side. His eye on that side was widening, the pupil dilating until it consumed the iris, leaving a perfect black circle. The Galactic Plague. The thought hit Jack like a physical blow. The Crimson Scourge, they called it, on the news feeds from the core worlds. It had been eating its way through the spiral arm for a decade. It was a footnote to their lives on this remote terraforming rock, a horror story for other people. They said it liquefied its victims from the inside out, a messy, agonizing death that took 3 days. This wasn't bad. This was quiet. It was orderly. It was 100 times more terrifying. Aris turned his head, and his one good eye, wide with a terror that was rapidly being replaced by something else, something alien and placid, found Jack's. The part of his face that used to be a mouth stretched, but it didn't open. A sound came out anyway, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in Jack's teeth. It was the sound of the station's deep-core geothermal converters. It was the sound of the planet itself. Jack scrambled backward, his boots slipping on the polished floor. He hit the door control with his elbow, and it hissed open. He didn't look back. He ran. He ran through the empty white corridors of the colony, the hum of Dr. Aris chasing him, promising a change that was far worse than any simple death. The news feeds had it all wrong. The plague didn't kill you. It unmade you. Commander Eva Rostova was a woman carved from granite. She had a jaw that looked like it could crack walnuts, and eyes the color of a winter sky. She did not like surprises, and Jack's story was the biggest, ugliest surprise to land on New Hope in its 10 years of operation. They sat in her office, a sterile box with a single window overlooking the red, dusty plains of the planet. Jack had been rambling for 5 minutes, his hands shaking, spilling coffee on the commander's brutally clean desk. His hand melted, Jack repeated for the 3rd time. It just flowed together, and his face. Rostova listened, her expression unreadable. She hadn't interrupted him. When he finally ran out of words, she leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. You're a maintenance chief, Jack. You're not prone to hysterics, I'll give you that. This isn't hysterics, Commander. This is real. Dr. Iris he's not Dr. Iris anymore. I've sealed the medbay, she said, her voice a low, steady calm in the storm of Jack's fear. I have a team in hazmat gear observing him through the cameras. You are under quarantine in your quarters until we know what we're dealing with. Quarantine? I wasn't that close to him. You were in the same room. That's close enough, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The official story is that there's been a chemical spill in the medbay. Dr. Iris was exposed. We need to maintain order. Order. The word sounded ridiculous to Jack. How could you have order when a man's bones were dissolving? Commander, this is the Crimson Scourge. It has to be. The Scourge turns people to soup, Jack. The reports are very specific, bloody, chaotic, and 100% fatal. What you're describing is something else. She looked out the window at the swirling red dust. Our gen mods were supposed to make us resistant to outside pathogens. Top-of-the-line, military-grade modifications. We were assured they were proof against the Scourge. Maybe they didn't work. Maybe the virus changed. Or maybe, Rostova said, turning her icy gaze back to him, our modifications are the problem. The thought was so cold it made Jack shiver. The very thing designed to protect them, to allow them to live here, was now a potential liability. It was like finding out your life raft was made of sponges. He was escorted to his family's small apartment by 2 security guards, who looked at him like he was a ticking bomb. Sarah opened the door, her face pale with worry. The 7-year-old daughter, Lily, peeked out from behind her legs. Jack? They said there was a spill. He couldn't lie to her. He pulled her inside, and the guards sealed the door from the outside, the hiss and clank of the magnetic locks sounding like a jail cell. It wasn't a spill, Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He looked at Lily, at her bright, curious eyes. Something's wrong with Dr. Aris, something terrible. He explained what he saw, leaving out the most gruesome details. Sarah listened, her hand over her mouth. She was a botanist, her life's work coaxing green things to grow in the station's hydroponics bays. She understood biology, mutation, things going wrong on a cellular level. It's the plague, isn't it? She whispered, her scientific mind getting there faster than he had. He nodded grimly. I think so, but it's not acting like they said it would. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to the familiar hum of the station's life support. It was a sound he'd always found comforting. Now it sounded like the hum Dr. Aris had made. He thought about the gen mods inside him, inside Sarah, inside Lily. Tiny, microscopic engines of change, implanted in their blood and bone. They had been a silent promise of safety. Now they felt like a betrayal waiting to happen, a switch waiting to be flipped. The fear wasn't just outside their locked door anymore. It was inside his own skin. Panic is a virus too. It spreads faster than any microbe, transmitted by whispers and sideways glances. By day 2 of the quarantine, the official story of a chemical spill was wearing thin. People knew. They didn't know what they knew, but the fear was thick enough to taste in the recycled air. The station's internal network, usually filled with requests for movie nights and complaints about the food synthesizers, had gone quiet. From their locked quarters, Jack, Sarah, and Lily could only watch the news feeds and talk to friends on their comms. The reports were all the same. The medbay was sealed. Commander Rostova was handling the situation. Then came the second case. It was a geologist named Marcus, a big, hearty man who ran the seismic sensors. His wife called Sarah, weeping hysterically. Marcus hadn't melted. His skin was changing. It was hardening, turning gray and crystalline, cracking like cooling lava. He was sitting in their living room, staring at his hands as they slowly turned to stone, and he was smiling. He said, "It's beautiful." His wife sobbed over the comm. He said, "He can feel the planet now, Jack. He can feel the tectonic plates shifting under us." Jack felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Iris hummed like the station's core. Marcus felt the planet. This wasn't random. There was a pattern here, a terrifying alien logic to the transformations. It was as if the plague was reading their genetic code, finding their specific modifications. Iris's dexterity mods, Marcus's mods for surviving high-G deep core drilling, and twisting them. By evening there were 2 more. A communications tech whose vocal cords had reconfigured themselves to emit a stream of pure, unmodulated static. And a hydroponics worker, one of Sarah's colleagues, whose arms were lengthening and branching, his fingers sprouting delicate, leaf-like appendages. He didn't seem to be in pain. He just stood in the middle of his quarters, arms outstretched, basking in the glow of his ceiling lamp like it was the sun. The quarantine broke, not because Rostova ordered it, but because it became impossible to enforce. You couldn't quarantine a quarter of the station's population. The security teams were scared. Their families were showing signs. Society on New Hope didn't collapse with a bang. It just dissolved, like sugar in water. Rostova appeared on the station-wide comm, her face grim. "We have an unknown biological agent on the station. It appears to be interacting with our genetic modifications. We are no longer dealing with the Crimson Scourge as we know it. We are dealing with something new." Her voice was steady, but Jack could see the strain in her eyes. "Stay in your quarters. Do not interact with anyone showing symptoms. Help is on its way. I have sent a distress call to the core worlds." Help. The core worlds were weeks away at best. Even with the fastest ship, they were on their own. That night, Lily woke up screaming. Jack and Sarah rushed to her bedside. She wasn't having a nightmare. She was pointing at her own hand, her eyes wide with fear. "Daddy, it's shiny," she whimpered. Jack knelt beside her small bed. He looked at her hand. In the dim light from the corridor, her skin was shimmering, catching the light in a way it shouldn't. It was covered in a fine, almost invisible layer of silvery dust, like powdered diamonds. When he touched her, his fingers came away glittering. Sarah let out a choked gasp. It had started, the thing that was taking the station apart, piece by piece, person by person, had come for their daughter. Jack pulled Lily into his arms, holding her tight, as if his embrace could somehow hold her human form together. He felt the fine, shimmering dust on his cheek, cold and alien. The enemy wasn't just outside the door anymore. It was in his arms. It was his little girl. Dr. Lena Evans was the station's chief xenobiologist. She was a small bird-like woman who usually spent her days analyzing lichen samples. Now, she was the most important person on New Hope. Working from a sealed biolab, she had been analyzing the blood of the first few changed, samples taken before the chaos began. Kemda Rostova patched her through to every comm unit on the station. Her face appeared on Jack's wall screen, pale and drawn. "I have an analysis," Evans began, her voice trembling slightly. "It is the Scourge virus. DNA sequencing confirms it. But it's not behaving like a normal virus. A normal virus hijacks a cell's machinery to replicate itself. It destroys the host cell in the process. That's what causes the liquefaction, the tissue death." She took a shaky breath. "This isn't what's happening here. The virus is infiltrating our cells, yes, but it's not destroying them. It's targeting the gene mod sequences. Specifically, the retroviral carriers we use to insert the new DNA into our genome." Jack held the sleeping Lily in his lap. Her skin still had that faint, unnatural shimmer. He listened, his stomach twisting into a knot. "It's acting like a key," Evans continued, her voice gaining a strange, almost fearful excitement. "The virus is a key, and our genetic modifications are the lock. It's not killing the cells. It's unlocking dormant potential within our modified DNA. It's triggering expression, rapid, uncontrolled, specialized evolution." A silence fell over the station as 200 people processed her words. Rostova's voice cut through it, sharp and clear. "What are you saying, Doctor? Evolution to what?" "To whatever the gen mod was for." Evans's voice cracked. "Dr. Aris's mods were for fine motor control in low gravity. His body is streamlining itself, becoming a tool for precise movement. Marcus's mods were for deep earth pressure resistance. He's becoming one with the rock. It's taking our greatest strengths, the things we engineered into ourselves to survive out here, and it's pushing them to their absolute, monstrous conclusion." "So that was it." "The great irony. Humanity had spent a century perfecting genetic engineering to conquer the stars. They had made themselves stronger, more resilient. And in doing so, they had accidentally built the perfect incubator for the galaxy's worst plague. The plague didn't need to kill them. It just had to turn the key. Their own bodies did the rest." "There's more," Evans said, her face ghostly on the screen. "The viral RNA doesn't just unlock the code, it connects it. I'm seeing patterns in the energy signatures from the infected. They're beginning to resonate with each other. Aris's humming, the Comtech static, Marcus's seismic awareness. They're not random. They're nodes in a network. They're starting to form a hive mind." A hive mind. The words hung in the air of Jack's small apartment. The changed weren't just individuals losing their humanity. They were becoming part of something larger, something new and terrifyingly alien. The comm screen went black. Sarah looked at Jack. Her eyes filled with a new kind of dread. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about identity. "What does that mean for Lily?" she whispered, looking at their daughter. "Lily's gen mods were standard for children born in space. Enhanced neuroplasticity for accelerated learning, improved cellular regeneration." What was the monstrous conclusion of that? What would a key unlock in a child designed to learn and grow faster than any human before her? Later that night, the humming started. It wasn't coming from the station's machinery. It was coming from outside their door. A low, resonant chorus of dozens of voices, all humming on the same frequency as Dr. Aris. It was the sound of the hive calling to its own. And in her sleep, Lily stirred. A soft silvery light pulsed from her skin, and for a single heart-stopping moment, she hummed back. The hum was the soundtrack to the end of their world. It was a constant low thrum that vibrated through the floor plates and the walls. It was the collective voice of the changed, and its presence meant that the station no longer belonged to the humans. Society had fractured into three groups. There were the changed, who now moved through the corridors with a silent, eerie purpose. They didn't speak. They didn't run. They just were. They seemed to be repurposing the station, but for what? No one knew. The man with leaf hands was tending to the hydroponics bay, but he was growing strange, crystalline plants that glowed with a soft blue light. The woman whose vocal cords produced static was sitting at the main comms console, her hands hovering over the controls, seemingly listening to the stars. Then there were the unchanged. A small fraction of the population, mostly older staff who had received first-generation, less complex gen mods. The virus seemed unable to find a lock to turn in their DNA. They were immune, but they were also trapped. They barricaded themselves in the engineering sector, led by a terrified but resolute Commander Rostova. And then there was Jack's family and a handful of others like them. The in-between. Those whose family members were starting to show signs, but who hadn't fully turned. They were caught in a terrible limbo, reviled by the unchanged and ignored by the changed. They hid in their quarters, the locks on their doors, their only protection against both sides. Jack's life shrank to the four walls of their apartment. His job was to keep Lily calm, to pretend this was all a strange game. He would read her old Earth stories about forests and oceans, places she had only ever seen on a screen. But it was getting harder. Lily's changes were accelerating. The silvery shimmer on her skin was brighter now. She barely ate, claiming the food tasted like metal. Instead, she seemed to draw energy from the lights in the room, sitting for hours under a lamp, her eyes closed in concentration. She had stopped talking, not because she couldn't, but because it seemed she no longer needed to. One evening, Jack was trying to get her to eat some nutrient paste. She shook her head, her small face serious. He felt a sudden clear thought in his own mind, as sharp and intrusive as a stranger's voice. "I'm not hungry, Daddy." Jack stumbled back, dropping the spoon. It clattered on the floor. "Sarah," he croaked. Sarah rushed over. "What is it?" Spoke to me in my head. Sarah knelt in front of Lily. "Lily, baby, can you hear me?" A faint smile touched Lily's lips, and in both their minds they heard her voice, clear as a bell. "Of course, Mummy. I can hear everyone." She wasn't just a potential member of the hive. She was a beacon. The humming outside their door grew louder, more focused. It was no longer a general broadcast. It was a call for her. Jack's training as a maintenance chief kicked in. A desperate search for a practical solution to an impossible problem. He couldn't fight them. He couldn't reason with them. But he knew the station. He knew its guts. "We have to move," he said, his voice firm. "We can't stay here. They know she's here. They want her." "Move where?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she held Lily's shimmering hand. "The maintenance tunnels," Jack said. "The old network. Section Gamma. It's sealed off the main grid. The life support is independent. They won't be able to sense us there. He grabbed a bag and started stuffing it with water packs and protein bars. It was a desperate plan, a rat's solution to flee into the walls. He was a maintenance man. His job was to fix things. But his daughter wasn't broken. His world was. And the only thing he could think to do was to run deeper into the machine that was falling apart around them. The maintenance tunnels were a forgotten world. A cramped, dusty maze of pipes and conduits that snaked through the bones of the station. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and old metal. Emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows, turning familiar machinery into crouching beasts. For Jack, it had once been his kingdom. Now it was their only sanctuary. He led Sarah and Lily through the labyrinth, his mag torch cutting a sharp beam through the darkness. Lily was no longer a burden. She was an asset. She moved with an unnatural grace in the gloom, her shimmering skin providing a faint, ethereal light. She didn't seem scared. She seemed curious. They found the access point to the sealed-off Gamma sector, a heavy blast door controlled by a manual wheel. It groaned in protest as Jack put his shoulder into it, the sound echoing down the tunnels. For a heart-stopping moment he thought the humming from the main station intensified, as if noticing their escape. Then the door swung open into blackness, and he hustled his family inside, sealing it behind them. They were safe for now. Gamma Sector was a ghost town. It had been the original command center before the station was expanded, now used only for deep storage. It had its own air and power, a relic of early-phase paranoia. They found a small office cleaned off a desk and made it their camp. For 3 days they lived in the silence. The absence of the hive's hum was both a relief and a source of anxiety. It was like living next to a volcano and waking up one day to find it had gone quiet. You didn't know if the danger had passed or if it was just gathering strength. Sarah tried to create a routine, a fragile bubble of normality. Lessons for Lily, shared meals of tasteless protein bars. But Lily was drifting further away from them. She spent her time tracing the complex wiring diagrams on the walls, her glittering fingers leaving faint trails on the dusty schematics. One afternoon, Jack heard Sarah cry out. He ran to the office to find her staring at the wall. Lily was standing before it, her hand pressed flat against a power conduit. The conduit and the wires snaking from it were glowing with a soft blue light, the same light as the crystalline plants in the hydroponics bay. "What is she doing?" Sarah whispered. Before Jack could answer, a nearby terminal flickered to life. It was a diagnostic screen, dead for years. Now lines of code scrolled across it. Too fast to read, it wasn't a language Jack recognized. It was elegant, complex, full of looping symbols that looked more like art than programming. Lily turned to them. She didn't smile. Her expression was one of intense concentration. "They're talking," her voice echoed in their minds. "The station. It's talking to the planet. And the planet is talking back." Jack stared at the screen, at the impossible code flowing across it. The Changed weren't just repurposing the station. They were turning the entire colony, this massive feat of human engineering, into a giant communications device. A telephone to the stars, or maybe not to the stars, to the very ground beneath their feet. Suddenly, the screen changed. It showed a schematic of the station's main geothermal tap, the massive drill that reached down into the planet's molten core for power. Red warning lights flashed all over it. A pressure alarm. A heat warning. A catastrophic failure imminent. "They're going to break it," Lily's thought. Voice said, a note of what sounded like concern entering it for the first time. "They're trying to draw too much power. They don't understand the human limits on the machinery. The core will overload. The whole station will be destroyed. Jack stared at the flashing warnings. He knew that system better than anyone. He had helped install it. He knew every valve, every failsafe. The changed, in their alien brilliance, were about to accidentally blow them all to kingdom come. And there was only one person on New Hope who knew how to stop it. Him. He would have to leave his sanctuary. He would have to go back out there, into the heart of the hive, and face the silent humming things that his friends and colleagues had become. The decision to leave was the hardest of Jack's life. Sarah pleaded with him to stay. "It's suicide, Jack. You can't go out there. What if they get you?" "If I don't go, the geothermal core will rupture," he said, his voice flat with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. "That's not what if, that's a guarantee. In about 6 hours, this whole station becomes a crater. There's nowhere to hide from that." He looked at Lily. She was watching him, her silver-dusted face serene. "You have to go, Daddy," she thought at him, her mental voice calm and clear. "They don't mean to hurt us, they just don't understand." Her lack of fear was more unnerving than any plea. It was as if she was already seeing the world from their side. She was no longer just Jack's little girl. She was a bridge between two worlds, and he was standing on the human side, about to take a terrifying step across. "I know the maintenance routes to the core control room," he told Sarah, pulling on a pair of heavy work gloves. "I can bypass the main corridors. I can get there without them even knowing." He kissed Sarah, a long, desperate kiss that tasted of fear. He knelt before Lily. "You be good for your mom," he whispered, his voice thick. She reached out and touched his cheek with her shimmering fingers. "Be careful," her thought came, simple and direct. And then another, fainter thought. Not meant for him, but he caught the edge of it. "He is coming." He didn't know what that meant. He didn't want to know. He slipped out of the blast door and back into the dark, humming labyrinth of the station. The journey was a nightmare. The station felt different, alien. The low hum of the hive was everywhere, a constant pressure against his skull. Strange, crystalline growth sprouted from the walls, pulsing with soft blue light, illuminating the corridors in a ghostly glow. He saw some of the caged from a distance, moving with their silent, shared purpose. He saw the geologist, Marcus, now more stone than man, pressing his hands to a wall, his craggy face tilted as if listening to a deep secret. Jack flattened himself into an alcove, his heart hammering, until Marcus moved on. He reached the primary control room for the geothermal tap. The doors were open. Inside, it was chaos. Not a human chaos of shouting and running, but a quiet, alien chaos. The comms tech with the static voice was there, her hands dancing over a console, making it spark and whine. 2 other change were simply standing in the room, their bodies altered in ways Jack couldn't comprehend, acting as living conduits. Energy, arc between them and the main reactor housing. The air crackled with power. The temperature gauges were all in the red. A high-pitched alarm was screaming, but no one seemed to notice or care. Jack knew he couldn't fight them. He had to be smarter. He slipped into a side maintenance crawl space he knew was there, a tight squeeze that led directly behind the main coolant control panel. It was hot, cramped, and smelled of burning plastic. He found the manual override for the coolant pumps. It was a simple, old-fashioned lever. A fail-safe designed by paranoid engineers exactly like him. The changed, with their focus on energy and data, had overlooked this piece of primitive physical machinery. He put his hands on the lever. It was burning hot. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the searing pain in his palms, and pulled. For a moment, nothing happened. The screaming alarm continued. The crackling energy in the room intensified. He pulled harder, putting all his weight, all his fear, all his desperate love for his family into it. With a deafening groan of metal, the lever moved. The emergency coolant pumps roared to life. A blast of supercooled nitrogen flooded the system. The temperature gauges on the main console plummeted. In the main room, the Changed turned as one. Their heads swiveled toward the control panel, toward the crawl space where he was hiding. They had felt him. They knew he was there. There was nowhere left to run. The silence that followed the roar of the coolant pumps was absolute and terrifying. Jack lay in the crawl space, his breath held, his hands screaming with pain from the hot lever. He was trapped. The three Changed in the control room stood perfectly still, their altered faces all turned toward his hiding spot. He had stopped their work, sabotaged their great project. He was an insect in their machine. He waited for them to rip the panel off the wall. He waited for the end. Instead, a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't Lily's. It was a chorus, 1,000 voices speaking as one. Yet it was clearer than any single voice he had ever heard. You do not understand. The voice was not angry. It was not threatening. It was curious, like a scientist observing a strange new life form. The vessel must be prepared, the voice continued. The energy is required for the final transmutation, for the awakening. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. Transmutation? Awakening. This was beyond him. He was a mechanic. He fixed broken things. A new voice joined the chorus, overlaying it. A voice he knew. It was Lily. He was afraid, Daddy. He was protecting us. The collective voice paused as if considering this. Fear. An interesting variable. A relic of singular consciousness. It creates inefficiency. But the core function, protection of the young, is logical. Slowly, Jack crawled out of the crawl space. He stood up, facing the three silent figures. The comms tech, the two others whose bodies were barely human anymore. Their eyes, or the places where their eyes had been, were all fixed on him. He expected to be torn apart. Instead, the comms tech tilted her head. The stream of static from her mouth ceased. A new sound emerged, a complex series of clicks and whistles like a dolphin's song. The terminal in front of her lit up, not with code, but with images. Stunning, impossible images. Swirling nebulae that look like living things. Galaxies connected by filaments of light. And a shape, a presence in the void between them. It wasn't a creature of flesh and bone. It was a being of pure geometry and thought, vast and ancient. We were a seed, the chorus of voices explained in his mind, as the images flashed before his eyes. Scattered across the void, the virus you call the Scourge is not a disease. It is a key, a catalyst. It seeks out life with the potential for connection, for transcendence. Jack stared at the screen, his mind reeling. Transcendence to what? He whispered aloud. To this, the voice said, and the image of the great cosmic being filled the screen. To join the whole, your species builds walls between minds. You live in silence and isolation. You engineered your own bodies for survival in the dark, and in doing so, you built the door. We have simply come to open it. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The galactic plague wasn't an invader. It was an invitation to shed their individuality, their humanity. and become a single note in a cosmic song. Humanity hadn't out-evolved the plague. The plague had found the one species clever and desperate enough to rewrite their own biology, to perfectly prepare themselves for this monstrous apotheosis. "Your child understands," the voice said. Lily's face appeared on the screen for a moment, her shimmering skin and calm eyes. "She is a nexus. A pure conduit. Through her the final connection will be made. The station will become the cocoon. The planet will become the cradle for the new form." The geothermal core overload wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. They needed that catastrophic burst of energy to finalize the process, to transform everyone on the station at once, to hatch. And he, Jack, in his ignorant human fear, had stopped it. He had saved them from destruction, only to strand them halfway between human and whatever came next. He looked at the changed, at their patient, alien stillness. He wasn't their enemy. He was just a delay. The distress call Commander Rostova had sent weeks ago was finally answered. It came not as a message, but as a shadow that fell across the red plains of New Hope, a warship. The UCF Retribution. A hulking gray predator of a ship designed for one purpose: sterilization. From their hiding place in Gamma Sector, Jack and Sarah watched its arrival on an old security monitor. Jack had jury-rigged. The ship hung in the sky like a judgment. Rostova's voice, tinny and strained, crackled over a private comm channel she had opened to the few remaining unchanged. "The Retribution is here. They're hailing us. They demand a full report. They know about the Scourge outbreak." Jack knew what that meant. The United Core fleets had a single protocol for Scourge-infected colonies. Protocol Gamma, complete orbital bombardment. No survivors, no witnesses, no chance for the plague to spread. To them, the changed weren't a new form of life. They were a contamination to be purged. "They're going to kill us all," Sarah whispered, her face ashen. "The changed us, everyone." Lily, who had been sitting quietly, looked up. Her shimmering skin seemed to pulse with a slow, steady light. "They are afraid," she sent to their minds. "The ship is a loud noise made by frightened men." A new communication came through, this one broadcast on all station channels. It was the voice of the Retribution's captain, a man whose voice was as hard and unforgiving as his ship's name. "New Hope Colony. This is Captain Valerius of the UCF Retribution. We have you under quarantine. Our deep-range scans confirm a massive bioalteration event, consistent with a variant Scourge outbreak. Prepare for sterilization procedures." A countdown clock appeared on the screen. 2 hours. Jack was caught in an impossible vice. On one side were the alien hive mind that had consumed his friends and was slowly claiming his daughter. On the other was the brutal, unthinking fist of the human military, ready to smash everything to dust to contain the infection. He had a choice, a terrible, stark choice. He could help Rostova and the Unchanged. He knew the station's defense systems. They were old, mostly for asteroid deflection. But he could activate them, maybe fight back, show the Retribution they were still human here, still in control. It would mean siding against the thing his daughter was becoming. Or he could do nothing. He could let the hive mind that had taken over the station face the warship alone. "Jack, what do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. She was looking at Lily, then at the image of the warship. She was torn between the daughter she had and the daughter she was losing. Jack looked at Lily. She was watching him, her gaze clear and steady. There was no fear in her eyes, only a profound, unsettling peace. He remembered the images she had shown him, the cosmic consciousness, the invitation. Was it a lie? A trick of the virus to ensure its propagation? Or was it the truth? He thought about the changed. They hadn't been violent. They had been purposeful. They had defended themselves only when he'd interfered with their plan. They weren't monsters. They were other. And Lily was becoming one of them. To fight them was to fight her. To save the idea of humanity, he would have to condemn his own child. The choice wasn't between human and monster. It was between the past and the future. A familiar, comfortable past and a terrifying, unknown, but potentially magnificent future. He looked at the countdown clock. 1 hour, 45 minutes. "I know what I have to do," Jack said, his voice heavy. He wasn't looking at the warship anymore. He was looking at his daughter. "I'm not going to fight her." He turned to the comm panel. He wasn't going to call Rostova. He was going to use his knowledge of the station's systems, not to fight the retribution, but to help the changed. He was going to finish what he had interrupted. He was going to help them overload the geothermal core. Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Jack, no, you can't. It will destroy the station. It will kill us." "It won't kill them," Jack said, his fingers already flying across a dusty keyboard, accessing systems he hadn't touched in years. "It's what they need. It's the energy for the hatching," Lily told me. He didn't know if he was insane or enlightened, but it didn't matter. He had chosen a side. "Thank you, Daddy." Lily's voice filled his mind, a wave of pure, uncomplicated gratitude that washed away his final doubts. He worked fast, his maintenance man's knowledge twisting into a new purpose. He wasn't fixing things. He was breaking them in a very specific way. He bypassed the coolant overrides he himself had activated. He disabled the emergency pressure vents for the geothermal tap. He was turning the station into a massive, planet-cracking bomb. On the security monitor, he could see the Retribution moving into a final attack position. Red lights flashed along its hull as its weapon ports opened. The countdown clock hit 30 minutes. In the station's corridors, the changed began to move. They weren't panicking, they were gathering. They flowed out of rooms and workshops, converging on the central dome of the station, directly above the main reactor. They formed a vast, silent circle. In the center stood the geologist Marcus, his stone body now glowing with internal heat, and the comms tech, who was emitting a soft melodic chime. Jack hit the final command. The geothermal tap, unchecked and uncooled, began to scream. The entire station shuddered, a deep, bone-jarring vibration. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, save for the red glow of the emergency alarms. "Jack!" Sarah screamed, grabbing his arm. But Lily was calm. A brilliant silver-white light poured from her body, illuminating the small room like a star. "It's time," she thought to them. "Don't be afraid." On the monitor, the warship fired. Lances of pure energy shot down from orbit, aimed at the station's heart. But they never hit. At the exact moment Jack's sabotage sent the geothermal core into critical overload, the changed acted. The circle of silent figures in the central dome raised their altered hands. The energy from the planet's core, a catastrophic torrent that should have vaporized the station, did not explode outward. It was drawn upward, channeled through their bodies as if they were living lightning rods. The entire station became a beacon. A pillar of raw, white-hot energy erupted from the central dome, shooting into the sky. It met the warship's energy lances and swallowed them whole. The station didn't explode, it bloomed. The metal walls around Jack, Sarah, and Lily became translucent, then transparent, like glass. They could see everything. The station's structure dissolving into pure light. They changed, becoming beings of energy, their physical forms shed like old coats. The red dust of the planet's surface stirring, rising up, infused with the light. Grass, real and green, sprouted from the alien soil, spreading in a wave across the plains. The sky turned from a dusty red to a brilliant living blue. The warship, its attack useless, was pushed back by a wave of creation, not destruction. It was like trying to shoot a hurricane with a pistol. Baffled and overwhelmed, the Retribution could only retreat. Its mission failed in a way its captain could never have conceived. Jack stood with Sarah, holding her tight in the heart of the newborn world. Their little apartment was gone, replaced by a field of glowing grass under a blue sky. All around them, the new life form that humanity had become danced as motes of sentient light. One of the motes, brighter and more silver than the rest, detached from the whole and hovered before them. It was Lily. She was no longer a little girl in shimmering skin. She was a star. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Her voice sang in their minds. No longer just a thought, but a part of the air, the light, the world itself. "We are all connected now. We are home." He was one of the last human beings, a relic of a singular, lonely consciousness, standing on the shore of a vast, new ocean. He had lost everything he knew. But as he looked at the vibrant, living world, born from the ashes of their fear, he realized humanity hadn't out-evolved a plague. It had out-evolved itself. And it was just the beginning.